Welcome to Reformed Thinking. I'm your host, and today we are taking a deep dive into a concept that, honestly, it completely shatters the way modern society operates.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, we're talking about the blessedness of possessing nothing, like the state of complete spiritual bankruptcy. And to do this, we're digging into some staggering theological analysis based on the writings of A.W. Tozer, looking closely at his insights on the human soul.
Right, which are just so striking.
They really are. And we will also be pulling apart the original Greek of Matthew 5.3, the opening of the Sermon on the Mount, and then looking at the ancient Hebrew text of Genesis 22.
The story of Abraham and Isaac.
Yeah. So our mission today, as we bring you into this conversation with us, is to figure out what it actually means to empty your hands so the king can fill them.
Which is, that is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. Think about how we usually operate. If you look at the culture around us, it feels like we are all accountants working in a giant, endless warehouse.
Yeah, always tallying things up.
Exactly. We measure a person's success, their security, their very identity by how much they could accumulate. You get a bigger house, a thicker financial portfolio, a longer resume.
The ledger just fills up.
Right.
Yeah.
And society points to that full column of assets and says, there it is, that is a life well lived. We just assume that addition equals security.
Well, and it makes sense from a purely human perspective, The more you can hold in your hands, the safer you're supposed to be from the unpredictable chaos of the world.
Yeah, it feels safe.
It is a primal instinct that equates ownership with safety. We build these little personal kingdoms to insulate ourselves.
But then you open the Manifesto of the King, the opening lines of Christ's public teaching, and that entire accounting system is thrown out the window.
Just completely flipped upside down.
Yeah. Suddenly Christ declares that true favor, true security belongs exclusively to those who are completely empty-handed, those who possess absolutely nothing.
To set the stage properly here, we really need to clarify what the source material is actually saying, because it is very easy to misunderstand this.
Oh, for sure. People take it to weird extremes.
Right. This is not a call to literal financial destitution. It is not an instruction manual for physical monasticism or a mandate to, empty your bank accounts and live on the street to prove you are holy.
Thankfully.
Yeah. Rather, this is a critical, surgical look at the inward posture of the soul before a sovereign creator. The issue is not the physical items you hold in your hands, but the proprietary grip your heart has on them.
Let's unpack that, because to understand how a person can become empty in this specific spiritual way, we first have to look at how human beings became so cluttered in the first place.
Yeah, we have to go back.
Right. The sources track this all the way back to the original creation.
Yeah.
In that pristine order, before sin entered the picture, God made material items, food, land, resources, relationships, as external entities meant for human use.
But they were strictly meant to be subservient.
Yeah.
That is a crucial distinction. The material world was designed to be useful, pleasant, and sustaining. God is not antimatter. He created the physical world and called it good.
Right.
But the human soul was designed with an internal sanctuary. You can think of it as a central throne room.
A throne room, yeah.
In the original design, that throne room was meant exclusively for the creator. The human being was supposed to find their life, their portion, and their consummate joy only in God.
And the external stuff.
The external items were gifts, held with an open hand, continually pointing the human heart back to the giver.
So the obvious question is, what disrupted that pristine setup?
The fall.
Yeah, the fall. The analysis we are looking at points out that the rebellion in Eden caused a catastrophic moral dislocation.
A total shift.
When humans rebelled, when they decided they wanted to be sovereign rulers themselves instead of submissive image bearers, the Creator was pushed out of that central shrine.
And here's the terrifying part about human nature. You cannot have a vacuum in the heart.
No, you really can't. Something has to sit on the throne.
Absolutely. A massive void was left behind, and all those external temporal items rushed in to usurp the vacant throne. The sources describe this resulting condition as a fibrous, dangerous disease of possessiveness.
Wow, a disease of possessiveness.
Yeah. This is where we start to see words like my and mine take on a really sinister reality.
Yeah, let's talk about those words for a second. We use them all the time. My house, my car, my career.
We do, and we think of them as innocent grammatical conventions. Just ways to identify who drives which car.
Sure, practical labels.
But spiritually speaking, they are actual symptoms of the old Adamic nature trying to claim absolute ownership over what rightfully belongs to God.
Man, that's heavy.
It is the unregenerate heart. The heart that has not been rescued and rewired by God's grace becomes a chaotic battlefield of idolatrous usurpers. Everything is trying to be king.
I want to bring in an analogy here to make this concrete for you listening. It is like a squatter taking over a magnificent mansion.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. The squatter sneaks in, realizes the true owner is currently absent, and starts putting their own name on all the furniture.
Hanging up their own pictures.
Yeah, picking out new drapes, rearranging the rooms, changing the locks on the front door, and aggressively defending the property against anyone who walks by.
Screaming at the neighbors.
Exactly. They scream, "This is my house." They completely forget they do not own the building. They did not pour the foundation. They did not buy the land. They are just a guest who has staged a hostile coup.
A total delusion of ownership.
But here is the trick, and I'd love your thoughts on this. How does this possessive instinct disguise itself? Because no one walks around introducing themselves by saying, "Hi, I'm an idolatrous hoarder."
Right. No one says that.
So how does this squatter mask their behavior as positive traits like, responsibility or prudence?
Well, that is the insidious nature of the human condition. The squatter relabels their tyranny to make it socially acceptable.
Give me an example.
So a person might look at their bank account, say, my money, and call their hoarding financial prudence or being a good provider.
Oh, yeah.
They might look at their kids, say, my child, and call their anxious, controlling grip parental responsibility. They might say, my ministry or my career, and label their ruthless ambition as dedication.
So the possessive self does not just enjoy gifts, it builds a throne for them. It turns blessings into rival sovereigns.
Spot on. This is why a person can have very little money and still be entirely enslaved to the few items they have.
Because it's not about the amount.
Right, you can be broke and still be an absolute tyrant over your tiny little kingdom. Conversely, a person can steward vast resources with an open hand, recognizing they are just managing the mansion for the true owner.
And if we extrapolate from that, if we really think about the psychology of the squatter, we can see how this idolatry creates constant paralyzing anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. The stress of defending it all.
Think about it. If you define your core identity by things you can lose, your reputation, your bank accounts, your physical health, your social standing, you will live in perpetual fear.
Because all of those things are incredibly fragile.
Completely. A stock market crash, a bad diagnosis, a single rumor on social media, and they can vanish in a second.
If your king can be stolen, your kingdom is always under threat.
Yes, you are spending your entire life barricading the doors of a house you don't even own.
Which perfectly sets up the historical shockwave of Christ's teaching. The human heart is naturally inclined to hoard, to claim ownership, to build massive defensive walls around its accumulated identity.
And into that reality,
Christ steps onto a hillside in Galilee and delivers the opening statement of his public ministry.
We are looking at the shocking manifesto of the king in Matthew 5.3. But before we get to the words, we really need to paint the historical picture for you.
Context is everything here.
It really is. Imagine first-century Galilean peasants. They are living under heavy Roman occupation. They are burdened by brutal taxation, political oppression, and rigid social stratification.
They are dirty, they are tired, and they are looking for a way out.
Right. And on top of the political oppression from Rome, they had the religious elite of their own people, the Pharisees and Sadducees.
Who were not making things any easier.
Not at all.
Yeah.
This religious establishment equated physical abundance and outward legalistic conformity with divine favor.
It was essentially a first-century precursor to the prosperity gospel.
The idea that if you are rich and healthy, God must really like you.
Precisely. The Pharisees believed that their pure Abrahamic lineage, their meticulous rule-following, and their material wealth guaranteed their entry into the Messianic kingdom.
They had it all figured out in their minds.
Yeah, they looked at the impoverished common citizens, the people who couldn't afford to keep all the microscopic purity laws, as spiritually marginalized. They viewed poverty or sickness as a direct punishment for hidden sin.
So you have this crowd gathered on the mountain. They're expecting, perhaps, a military leader to overthrow Rome, or at least a teacher who will validate their nationalistic expectations.
Someone to tell them how to finally beat the Pharisees at their own game.
Yeah. But Christ ascends the mountain, sits down, which, by the way, was the posture of ultimate rabbinic authority, and shatters every single carnal expectation in the crowd.
He opens the Beatitudes with the words, "Blessed are the poor in spirit."
Just boom. right out of the gate.
To grasp the sheer magnitude of this statement, the sources provide a rigorous breakdown of the Greek word choice here. And it's fascinating.
Yeah, let's get into the Greek.
The Greek language actually has two distinct words for poverty, and the distinction changes everything.
Okay.
The first word is penes. This describes a working laborer. A penes might have to work hard every day for a meager wage, living paycheck to paycheck, but they are functional.
Like a day laborer.
Right. They are self-sufficient, they earn their own keep, they have calluses on their hands and a sense of pride in their hard work. Jesus did not use that word.
Wait, so he didn't just mean a blue-collar worker living on a tight budget?
No. He used the word puchos.
Tuchos.
Yeah. This word is derived from a root verb meaning to cower, to shrink, or to hide oneself in fear.
Wow.
It denotes a completely destitute beggar. We're talking about someone who produces absolutely nothing, has zero resources, and relies entirely on the alms and mercy of others just to survive the day.
That paints a totally different picture.
Picture someone hiding in an alleyway with a tin cup, face covered in shame. It is a state of absolute abject bankruptcy.
That changes the whole tone of the sermon. He isn't saying, blessed are the hard workers who are a little down on their luck.
Not at all.
He is saying, blessed are the spiritual beggars with the tin cups.
Yes. But he does not stop at physical destitution. He adds a specific grammatical phrase, the locative dative phrase, tutumati, which translates to in spirit.
Let's translate that for someone who doesn't have a Greek lexicon handy. He is literally pinpointing the geography of the poverty.
Yes. He locates this total destitution internally. He is saying, blessed are those who realize they are absolute, cowering beggars in their spiritual standing before God.
Man. And the literary structure of the text highlights this as the baseline requirement for everything else that follows.
That's the foundation.
Right. When you look at the Beatitudes, they are bracketed by a grammatical inclusio. Verse 3 says, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And verse 10 repeats that exact same phrase.
Creating a bracket around the whole section.
Exactly. This brackets the entire section, demonstrating that this spiritual poverty is the gateway. You cannot mourn your sin. You cannot hunger and thirst for righteousness. You cannot be merciful or pure in heart until your illusion of self-sufficiency has been completely broken.
You have to start at zero.
Yeah.
And the text says, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The Greek uses the present tense verb estin. This proves it is a present reality for the believer, not just some far-off future hope. The beggar holds the kingdom right now.
But I have to ask, based on the historical context you just laid out regarding the Pharisees, how incredibly offensive would this be to an affluent, self-righteous religious leader standing in the crowd?
Oh, it would be infuriating.
I mean, does this entirely destroy the idea that humans have some native spark of goodness they can contribute to their own salvation?
It is a total demolition of human boasting. To a Pharisee who spent his entire life building a massive resume of moral achievements, tithing his spices, fasting twice a week, this statement is an absolute affront.
Because they want a transaction.
Right. The Pharisee wants to approach God like a business partner. He wants to negotiate with God using his assets.
But Christ shuts the door on that.
Christ shuts the door on all human bargaining. The kingdom does not open to the person who comes with a moral resume. It opens exclusively to the one who beats their breast and pleads for mercy.
Dropping the resume and picking up the tin cup.
Yeah, it confirms that the human will cannot contribute to its own regeneration. The sinner is not a self-sufficient worker who just needs a little assistance to get over the finish line.
Right.
The sinner is a bankrupt beggar who needs sovereign grace to even breathe.
That is a massive paradigm shift. You stop presenting your assets and you start confessing your absolute need. Now, Jesus preaches this total internal destruction of the ego on a hillside in Galilee. But the crazy part is, this wasn't a new concept.
No, not historically.
If you rewind the timeline, 2,000 years, you see this exact principle played out in real time on another mountain. We are talking about Mount Moriah and the narrative of Abraham and Isaac in Genesis 22.
This narrative provides the historical flesh and blood to the doctrine of spiritual poverty.
It really does.
Genesis 22 records the moment God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son, Isaac. To understand the crushing weight of this command, we have to look closely at its literary placement in the book of Genesis. This happens immediately after Genesis 21.
Right, and let's remind ourselves what happens in Genesis 21.
Please do.
The long-awaited child of promise, Isaac, is finally born after decades of agonizing waiting. Abraham is 100 years old, and crucially, Ishmael, Abraham's other son born of Hagar, is permanently expelled from the camp.
That sequence is vital to the tension of the story.
It isolates Isaac.
Exactly. By expelling Ishmael, the narrative isolates Isaac as the absolute sole heir. Isaac is now the exclusive vessel for the entire covenant promise.
All the eggs are in one basket.
Every single one. All of God's promises regarding the land of Canaan, the descendants outnumbering the stars, and the ultimate blessing to all the nations of the earth are now bottlenecked entirely in this one teenage boy.
Now, we know from history that the pagan nations around Canaan practiced child sacrifice.
Yeah, they did.
They would offer their children to deities like Molech, putting them into the fire to appease the gods, to buy favor, or to ward off famine and disaster. So someone reading this might think Yahweh is just acting like Molech.
Right, that's a common modern misconception.
But the sources are clear that Yahweh's test had a completely different aim. It was not about appeasing an angry, capricious deity. It was about purging paternal affection of idolatrous clinging.
And the exegetical analysis of the Hebrew text here is chilling in its precision.
Tell me about the Hebrew.
When God gives the command in verse 2, the Hebrew syntax uses a progressive, narrowing accumulation of terms. It says, Bincha your son, Yetchidi your only son, Asher Ahapta whom you love, Yitzhak Isaac.
Wow. Think about the psychological impact of hearing that.
That's agonizing.
God does not just say, hey, take Isaac up the mountain. He forces Abraham to walk through every single layer of his affection. Your son, the only one left, the one you love.
Yeah.
Isaac.
He is shining a spotlight on the precise target of potential idolatry in Abraham's heart. He is isolating the squatter in the mansion.
That's intense.
And the analysis points out a crucial theological reality here. This test was not a choice between a sinful item and God.
Right, because Isaac was a good thing.
Exactly. This is where we often get idolatry wrong. Isaac was not evil. Loving your son is not a sin. It is a biological and moral imperative.
Of course.
The test was a choice between a holy gift and the holy giver. Abraham had to prove that the covenant seed belonged entirely to the Lord, and that he loved the promiser more than he loved the physical form of the promise.
This requires Abraham to take a 3-day silent trek toward the mountain. Let's just sit with that for a second.
3 days of silence.
Think about the psychological agony of those 3 days. He has the wood strapped to the donkey, he has the fire in his hand, he has the boy walking next to him asking questions.
Where's the lamb, Father?
Yeah. With every step, dust kicking up from the road, Abraham is executing his own proprietary instinct. He had to kill his own self-life, his own claim to ownership over his son, long before they ever reached the top of the mountain.
The sacrifice started on day 1 of the journey.
By the time the physical knife was raised, the internal sacrifice was already complete. But here's the logical dilemma I want to push back on. Because if I am Abraham, my brain is short-circuiting.
This makes sense.
How could Abraham obey a command that seemed to cancel out God's previous promise? God explicitly said, "Through Isaac shall your offspring be named." Then God says, "Kill Isaac." That seems like a glaring contradiction that would paralyze a rational person.
It absolutely appears contradictory to human logic, which is exactly why it was the ultimate test of faith. But the text gives us a window into Abraham's theology.
Oh, the part with the servants?
Yes. When they arrive at the base of the mountain, Abraham turns to his servants and says, "Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you.
Notice the pronoun.
We will come back to you."
He didn't say, "I will come back to you."
Right. Abraham had reached a point of spiritual poverty where he trusted the nature of the promiser absolutely, even when the method was completely hidden from him.
He had no idea how it was going to work out.
None. The New Testament commentary on this in Hebrews tells us that Abraham reasoned that God was able to raise Isaac from the dead if necessary.
Wow.
He did not require God to explain the mechanism before he offered obedience. He essentially said, "I have no idea how you're going to keep your promise if I turn my son into ashes, but I know you cannot lie, so I will obey."
That is the ultimate open hand.
Utter surrender.
So Abraham and Isaac go up. The altar is built. The boy is bound. Abraham raises the knife, fully intending to strike, and his hand is arrested by a voice from heaven at the very last second.
Just right at the peak moment of tension.
He turns and sees a ram caught in a thicket by its horns, which is provided as a substitute for Isaac. Abraham names the place Yahweh-Yireh, the Lord will provide.
And this moment points directly to a future moment on that exact same mountain range.
This is where it all comes together.
Yes, this is where the historical shadow finds its redemptive reality. The geographical ridge of Moriah is the same ridge where Golgotha, the site of Christ's crucifixion, is located.
The same exact place.
The parallels established in the text are mathematically precise.
Let's lay these parallels out for you listening, because if you were hearing this for the first time, it is staggering. You have Isaac, the beloved only son of the Father, carrying the heavy wood for his own sacrifice up the mountain.
Which directly mirrors Christ.
Yes, the eternal only begotten Son of the Father, carrying the heavy wooden cross up to Golgotha.
You also have Isaac's silent submission. He is a strong young man. He could have easily overpowered his 100-year-old father.
Easily.
But he does not fight back or resist being bound upon the altar. This mirrors the Lamb of God, who is led silently to the slaughter, opening not his mouth, willingly laying down his life.
But the theological climax happens at the moment of intervention. On Mount Moriah, the hand of human execution is stopped. God spared the human son.
And why?
Because centuries later, God had decreed he would not spare his own eternal son. The sword of divine justice, arrested over Isaac, was fully awakened against Christ.
That is the crux of it.
And look at the substitute. The ram is caught by its horns in a thicket of thorns.
The imagery is just unavoidable.
This vividly represents Christ, crowned with thorns, taking the unmitigated wrath of divine justice. I like to think of this in terms of a courtroom analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you show up at a high court, and that ledger we talked about earlier is brought out by the prosecutor. But instead of being full of assets and good deeds, it is full of massive, unpayable debt.
You are completely bankrupt.
The judge looks at the ledger. He's a just judge, which means he does not just wave a magic wand and pretend the debt does not exist. Justice requires a payment.
Right, sin has to be punished.
The sentence is pronounced. But then the judge's own son steps into the courtroom. He takes your ledger, pays the debt in full out of his own infinite account, and then, here's the wild part, he imputes his own perfect credit score onto your record.
That courtroom analogy captures the absolute essence of substitutionary atonement and imputed righteousness.
It's just a beautiful exchange.
It really is. The spiritually bankrupt beggar receives the kingdom not as a wage they earn through good behavior, but as a gracious adoption.
A total gift.
The justice of God is completely satisfied by the substitute, and the perfect, flawless record of the substitute is legally credited to the beggar.
This secures eternal justification.
Yes, and it proves that the blessedness of possessing nothing is not about the drama of our personal surrender. It is entirely about the Lord who provides the atonement.
We bring nothing to the table but the sin that made the cross necessary.
That's right.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most difficult part of our discussion today. With all this historical and theological groundwork laid, how does a person actually apply this painful extraction to their own life right now?
That is where the rubber meets the road.
How do we put the squatter on the street?
Well, the sources are incredibly blunt about this. The old Adamic possessive instinct is described as a tough old miser, or a deep-rooted, invasive weed.
It's not going to just leave quietly.
No, it is not going to leave your soul simply because you politely ask it to. It will not lie down and die based on a casual preference or a New Year's resolution.
Can't just manage it.
It must be extracted through the violent, purifying force of the indwelling Holy Spirit. We have to specifically name our modern Isaacs.
Because, let's be honest, modern idols are rarely wooden statues or golden calves.
Yeah.
We don't bow down to carved blocks of wood in our living rooms.
No, our idols are much more respectable.
Much more. They are our families, our children's success, our academic reputations, our financial portfolios. They can even be theological distinctives held with a proud, argumentative hand.
Oh, absolutely.
You can make an idol out of being the smartest guy in your Bible study.
The analysis offers a strict critique of modern church trends in light of this reality. It points out how pragmatic, seeker-sensitive movements and certainly prosperity teachings cater directly to our carnal desire for self-preservation.
They feed the squatter.
Yes. These movements tell people how to gain the world, how to maximize their earthly security, how to use God as a cosmic vending machine to get the life they want.
Which directly contradicts Christ's call to lose one's life.
True divestment is completely countercultural. It goes against everything our flesh screams for.
I want to pause here and clarify something because it is very easy to misunderstand this application.
Yeah, let's be clear.
This divestment, this possessing nothing, does not mean hating your family or quitting your job. It does not mean treating your children with cold indifference or intentionally tanking your bank account.
That would just be asceticism for its own sake.
Right. It means taking the item off the throne of your heart and making it a servant again. When Abraham walked down the mountain, he still had his son, he still had his wife, he still had his herds.
But the relationship had changed.
The toxic ownership was permanently broken. He possessed them as gifts, not as gods. So let me ask the diagnostic question for you listening. What loss would make you accuse God?
That is the razor-sharp edge of the issue right there.
If God removed a specific relationship, a career path, a financial safety net, or a physical ability, and your immediate reaction would be to put God on trial, to point your finger at the sky and accuse him of cosmic injustice, whatever that item is, that is likely your Isaac.
That is the squatter sitting on the throne.
And putting that squatter to death requires concrete obedience.
It rejects emotional mysticism or quietism where you just sit in a dark room and try to feel detached from the world.
Right, you can't just meditate your way out of it.
Mortification does not happen by meditating on emptiness. True mortification happens through objective, word-centered reality.
Looking at the truth of Scripture.
It happens when you look at the cross, realize the absolute sovereignty of God, and hold all earthly goods with an open hand. You actively return them to the Lord in prayer, acknowledging this 401k is yours, this child is yours, this house is yours.
You manage them as a steward rather than a proprietor.
Yeah.
So what does that look like on a random Tuesday morning? Let's say the stock market takes a huge dive, or you lose your job. The natural instinct is panic, because the squatter is screaming that his kingdom is under attack.
The walls are crumbling.
But the bankrupt beggar, the one who is poor in spirit, looks at the situation and says, well, it wasn't my money anyway. The owner decided to move some funds around.
It completely defangs the panic.
Doesn't it?
Exactly. When you possess nothing, you have nothing to lose. The anxiety evaporates because you are no longer burdened with the impossible task of playing God over your own life.
You move from the fragile anxiety of the squatter to the secure peace of the adopted heir.
You no longer have to fiercely guard your identity because your identity is held securely in the hands of the promiser.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's summarize the main argument. Possessing nothing is the only way to possess everything.
It sounds like a paradox, but it's the truest thing in the world.
By completely divesting yourself of ownership claims, by admitting your absolute spiritual bankruptcy before the king, you gain the unshakable inheritance of his kingdom.
You trade your tin cup for the righteousness of Christ.
It is the greatest exchange in the history of the universe. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we have discussed today.
I love this part.
Consider how practicing this inward spiritual dispossession actually prepares you for the physical reality of mortality. Think about it. Death is the great equalizer.
It comes for everyone.
When you pass from this physical world, you will literally take none of your earthly goods with you. The ledger stays here. The house stays here. The resume stays here.
You leave with empty hands.
If you train your soul now to view everything, your home, your wealth, your very breath, as a temporary loan rather than a permanent possession, could the inevitable loss of your items at the end of your life be experienced not as a tragic theft, but as a joyful, final returning of rented goods to a trusted owner?
It changes the entire paradigm of death. It ceases to be a violent stripping away of your treasures and becomes the moment you finally meet the true treasure face to face.
Spot on. So, as we close the books in our giant warehouse today, remember that the true measure of your life is not found in the overflowing columns of your ledger.
No, not at all.
True blessedness is found when the ledger is empty, your hands are open, and the King himself fills the void. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you for listening.